Back at it again. We're doing a take 5 for the Gophers class of 2023. This might be my favorite class of the three, and you're going to find out why today.
Hey, you are Locked On Golden Gophers. No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
What is up, Gophers fans? You are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. And today we're having three little mini shows of Sunday to close off the month of March. And we're doing our top 5, take 5 of the recruiting classes in the last 3 years. Now, we did our 2022 class. Hopefully you've already listened to that one. And now we're moving on to the class of 2023. And this might be my favorite class of the three by far and away. And I think you'll hear why as you get into some of the names here, but also some of the upside, I believe, is in this class. Now, the top guys of this class have already been shown out as their true freshmen last year, but could any in next year's class maybe rival some of that? We'll get into that on the next episode, so definitely be sure to tap into the 2024 class as well. But today we're talking about the 2023 class, and we're going to dive into who my top 5 players are. Now, what is the top 5 take 5? It is a show where we're highlighting 5 players that we think will be the best players in their graduating class, in their recruiting class, that will leave their footprint, their impact on this Gophers program the most of that class. So we're going to dive into it. Now, I have a couple of honorable mentions, seeing as these players in this class are either going to be redshirt freshmen this year or they were true freshmen last year that got some opportunities. So we haven't seen a lot of these guys on the field, if at all. So who are my honorable mentions before we get into the actual top 5 of the take 5? Now, the first honorable mention for me, and I have 3 honorable mentions. First one is Theron Randall. I think he's going to be a menace on the run defensive side of things from the defensive line. He might not start at all. He might not play in a rotation at all in this 2024 season, but I think once you hit 2025, you're going to start to see Theron Randall's name pop up more and more. Along with him, his partner in crime, Martin Owusu, I think he can also step up, cause havoc for some of the opposing offensive lines. But I think Martin Owusu just has that Gophers mantra, that Gophers characteristic, that Gophers leadership. He is one of the guys that really helped put this class together, keep these guys together, keep these guys inspired, keep these guys moving, and can help bring in some of these names, but also bring in names of the 2024 class, just with how committed he was to the Gophers. Even when the Badgers came calling late in his recruitment period, he was like, nah, I'm locked in at home, ready to row and ready to go. And I think that he is going to find himself in an opportunity to play big minutes somewhere in his career with Gophers. And he's going to be a name that people absolutely love to see on the field. And I think he's going to find his way into some impact. So I'm going to put him as an honorable mention. And then another defensive line player. All 3 of my honorable mentions are defensive linemen. Carter Menz, he's an edge rusher. I think he has a lot of upside. He is a shifty kid, has a lot of bend to him, and I think that he could maybe start to work into the rotation this year for the defensive line in 2024, but absolutely could put his name into the conversation as guys like Strigow and Ja Joyner leave after this season. I think Carter Menz is going to be one of the names that starts to become more of a regular moving forward. So those are my honorable mentions. So who made it into the top 5? Well, the first player that made it into my top 5 is Kerry Brown. Now, Kerry Brown only really played in about 1.5 games. We'll call it 2 games. I believe he played in the Wisconsin game and the bowl game due to injuries last season. So he played as a true freshman, and he kind of held his own, if we're being honest. He was able to, especially in the bowl game, put things together and make it so that way he wasn't a liability, but he was more of a stopgap for all the injuries that were happening to the Gophers safety room. Kerry Brown really impressed me over that stretch. He ended up getting a PFF grade of a 61 after being thrown into the fire. He wasn't really expected to play. Now, he kept his red shirt So he only played in 2 games, but I think he could really make a case to be a starter at the safety position for the Gophers as a redshirt freshman. And if he makes that happen, I think he could end up solidifying a safety spot moving forward throughout his career, like we've seen from a Tyler Nubin, like we've seen from a Jordan Howden. Once they really get into the groove and they lock that thing down, they keep going, keep producing, keep grinding, and keep their name at the forefront. And I think Kerry Brown is a guy who could do just that. Now, the best part of his PFF grading last year was his tackling. He had an 81.3 PFF grade overall, and I think that that is just phenomenal, especially for being thrown into the fire as a true freshman. Now, he took 43 snaps from the free safety position, and he lined up in the box on 18 of those snaps, so he's got a little bit of versatility. He can be lined up a little bit differently, but I loved what I saw from Kerry Brown in his very brief moments versus Wisconsin and versus Bowling Green in the bowl game. So he comes in at number 5. Now, number 4 is a guy I have been touting left, right, and center in this class. We haven't seen him actually touch the field for the Gophers. He redshirt in his first year because of the depth of his position, but I do think he could make his way into the room this year, possibly and for sure in 2025, and that is none other than Georgia receiver Kenrick Lanier. Now, he's playing with a Georgia quarterback as well, so maybe they'll develop a chemistry. I know they were working together in the offseason prior to spring ball, and I'm sure they're going to work together in the offseason after spring ball as well. Kenrick Lanier has a ton of upside, has a ton of potential, has the build to be a nice receiver, has the strength to be a nice receiver, was a 4-star guy coming into this class, and an All-American Bowl player that stood out there too. So Kenrick Lanier is a guy you should definitely have your eyes on. Now, when we were looking at the spring games last year, he was working with the twos. He was standing out to Coach Fleck, and there was a lot of information just being thrown and spit at him. And he talked about how you just kind of hit a wall and you see how much sticks. But Kenrick Lanier seemed to grasp onto a lot of it, seemed to continue to build onto it. And now he's working behind guys like Daniel Jackson. He worked with a guy like Chris Ottman-Bell. He's working with guys like Lemecki Brockington and Elijah Spencer. And he's able to absorb all of that knowledge, absorb what it takes to be a producer in this Big Ten. And I think as he gets his opportunity, he can really run away with it and become a future leader of this Gophers wide receivers room. So I think Kenrick Lanier is definitely a guy that can be in this top 5 and be one of the most impactful players of this class. Now, number 3, if you think I've talked about Kenrick Lanier like a bunch on this podcast and talked about him being one of my guys and the upside of him, then you've definitely heard me talk about this next guy, probably even more. Number 3 is Zaquan Bryan, cornerback for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, also coming from Georgia. And I think this guy is one of the most athletic. Actually, I believe Coach Fleck said in the signing day last year that Zaquan Bryan is probably the most athletic player in this entire class. And that includes a guy like Kenrick Lanier. That includes a guy like Darius Taylor. That includes so many players that have a high upside, that are strong, that have athleticism. But Zaquan Bryan is a dude, and he got it done in high school as both a wide receiver and a cornerback. Not only was he a playmaker on the offensive side of ball, but he laid the smack down. He can lay the wood on the tackling as a cornerback. Now, we didn't expect to see a ton of him in his true freshman year, but he found a way onto the field, and he found his way passing a lot of players on that depth chart. I could honestly see him right now being the second or third cornerback on this team moving forward, and I don't think he's going to slow down. I think he's only going to progress, and he's only going to continue to work and drive and put his name into the conversation to be a starter for this Gophers team. I think his motor is high. I think he brings a lot of great speed. I know he had a great speed in the track times in high school, so he's got speed, he's got athleticism, and he can lay the wood or lay a hit on the smackdown. So that is exactly what you're looking for in a cornerback. And having those wide receiver skills, he understands where wide receivers want to move, how they want to move, the different things to look at and film, and how to break it down and look for people's tells. And you saw him in the bowl game take on the best player of the Bowling Green Falcons in Fannin Jr. and a huge critical third down play where Bowling Green is trying to drive the field and really get themselves back into the game. And Fannin Jr. has this catch across the middle of the field, and Zaquan Bryan pops the ball out, has a PBU. And on top of that, Fannin Jr. was clearly feeling the hit that I'm talking about, because dude was shooken up after this. You're talking about one of the best players in the entire MAC conference And Zaquan Bryan made an impact on him and then some. He definitely stood out to me in his very limited time, but I think his limited time is only going to get better. And his tackling grade on PFF was a 76.6. So as he continues to get more immersed into this defense, as he gets more comfortable with this defense, I think the sky is the limit with this guy. And I think he is going to improve in this class and put his name into the top 3 of the class of 2023. He is definitely rocking with me every step of the way. Now we're moving to the top 2 of this class. Number 2 is Greg Johnson. I had to have him in the top 2, being a guy who went in and played a ton of snaps as a true freshman and now is looking to possibly be the starting center for the Gophers in 2024. And he might not be a center in 2025. He might move to a different position, whether that be a guard or a tackle or what have you, but he shows his versatility. He shows that he is willing to do whatever it takes for this team and whatever it takes to get on the field. So I think that is a major stepping point for him, because he could be like, nah, I'm a guard. That's what I do. And he was like, no, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get on this field as a true freshman, as an early enrollee. Whatever you need, I'm going to do it. He pushed himself there. He showed that he had the work ethic. He showed he had the strength. He showed he had a pickup of the playbook, and he got himself on the field as a true freshman. Now he's probably going to be a starter as a sophomore and in a new position that we haven't seen him play. But I think that he is going to take it stride for stride and be a key player for the Gophers long-term. And next season, Greg Johnson definitely had to be at the top of this list. Another guy along with Martin Owusu that really helped keep this class together and keep these guys building a brotherhood. Love that both of the Prior Lake boys getting it done. He comes in at number 2, and then number 1 is obviously Darius Taylor, the all-world running back. I don't care what you say. I think he is going to be a top 3 running back in the Big Ten in the 24 season. I think he's going to be a top 10 running back in the entire country. I think Darius Taylor, the sky is the limit, and this dude is going to open up a lot of eyes, because some people might have forgotten due to the injuries and being off the field a little bit here and there. But when this guy was going, he led the entire Big Ten Conference in rushing yards. And even if you take his limited sample size because of the injuries, those 7 games he played, even with a game where he only got 1 carry for 3 yards, which counts against him when it comes to yards per game, even taking that counting against him, he led the entire country in yards per game at 133 yards per game. This dude always falls forward. He always finds a way to break through the contact. He has a motor that keeps on going. He has vision. He has cuts or cutback ability, and that is all in his true freshman season. So what happens when it slows down for him? What happens when he gets stronger? What happens when he gets healthier and he builds his body to take on the hits, to take on the flexibility, to take on the durability of a season? If that continues to build up, this dude is going to be a menace and a program legend. So Darius Taylor is my number 1 far and away. And that's my top 5. Now we're going to wrap up today's show, mini episode of the top 5, take 5, by talking about who will be starters at some point in this class, who already has been starters, and who in this class is already transferred. We have had some transfers. I'll go through who the whole class is for the names that you might have forgotten. And then finally, to wrap it up, we're going to talk about who to keep in mind long-term as starters if they stay and develop. That's all coming up next. Look, y'all, I got to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime, because they are the number 1 ticketing app in my mind, far and away. And if you haven't downloaded the app yet, it is past due, because Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. And prices on Gametime actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So you can literally have a priority on last minute ticket deals, save up to 60% when buying last minute sports concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And on top of that, I have to talk about the all-in pricing, because it saves you headaches. How many times have you gotten onto a ticketing app and been like, all right, yeah, these seats look good. You know what? Let's grab 2 of these. I'm excited. We're going to get going. The seats were only this much. And you get to the checkout, and all of a sudden the prices went from what you were expecting plus an additional like $80 because of ticketing fees and things like that. You don't have to worry about all that on Gametime, because you can go to the all-in pricing and toggle this feature to show the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. That has to be just a relief of stress and looking forward to the events that you're going to by going to the all-in pricing. And you can do that, plus get seat views and their lowest price guarantee, where Gametime promises you'll get the lowest price of those tickets, or Gametime Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So definitely take a chance on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply, but it's super simple. Like I said, all you do is download the app, use promo code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON college for $20 off by downloading the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, like I said, we did the top 5 take 5 for the class of 2023. I think this is my favorite class of the 3, and we're talking about players who have been starters or could be starters in the near future or the long-term future. And on top of that, who are players that have transferred in this class? So before we get into all that, let's talk about and list all of the players from this 2023 class. You've got Kenrick Lanier, Greg Johnson, Darius Taylor, Jerome Williams, Zaquan Bryan, Phillip Daniels, Carter Menz, TJ McWilliams, Garrison Monroe, Daniel Nuke Hayes, Kerry Brown, Marquise Williams, Drew Vioto, Alex Elliott, Martin Owusu, Matt Kingsbury, Reese Tripp, Theoren Randall, Sam Peters, Pierce Walsh, and Eric Mister. It's a big class, a massive class. And you know what? I think that they have the highest upside of the 3 classes. And we're seeing names that people maybe weren't extremely knowledgeable on starting to make their way into the rotations of this Gophers offense. I know Phillip Daniels is working with the 2s when it comes to the right tackle position. He is a guy that maybe could push Martez Lewis for a starting opportunity either this season or next season if he continues to build and grow with this team. Carter Menz is a player that I've mentioned. Jerome Williams was a 4-star guy on 3's platform, and he is a guy from Osseo who didn't have a ton of football playing experience, but he has a ton of upside. I know he's worked with the center position a little bit. He's worked on the interior a little bit. He's a name that definitely has some upside. TJ McWilliams was a guy who played in the All-American Prep Bowl. So there's a lot of players in this class that could really pop off if given the opportunity. So who are players that I think you should keep in mind long term? We're going to get right there, but first let's talk about who's transferred from this team. The first one is Marquise Williams. He transferred to Akron, Ohio. So I'm not sure if it was just wanting more opportunity to play or what have you, but then you also have Drew Vioto, who was a quarterback who ended up transferring to Eastern Michigan to go and try and be their starter. So those are the only players who have transferred thus far, but you've got players in this class that who will be starters at some point. Well, we've already got Darius Taylor and Greg Johnson who have started games for this Gophers team. Now, I believe Zaquan Bryan is going to be a starter sooner than later. I think that Kerry Brown could put his name into that starting conversation even this year. And then long term, I think Kenrick Lanier could end up being a starter. Carter Menz could end up being a starter. Theoren Randall could be a starter. Maybe Sam Peters at the tight end position, but actually I think Pierce Walsh was starting to get a couple ones looks in that first spring practice we were able to see, so maybe he could work himself into a starter at the tight end position long term. I think there's a ton of players with upside in this class, and if they stick around and they continue to build and continue to develop and don't hit the transfer portal but wait their turn, I think of guys like Nathan Bowe, like Tyler Cooper, like different players of that sort of ilk or stature that waited for their opportunity and then really ran with it for a year or 2 as the starters. I think players that can fit that mold are like Martin Owusu, like Jerome Williams. I think Nuke Hayes could fit that. I think he's a wide receiver that has a lot of opportunities. TJ McWilliams is another one. Garrison Monroe is a very unique name. I know he was working at the nickel position, but also I've seen him work into the safety rotation already in this spring. I think those are all names you definitely want to keep in mind moving forward long term. And I think the last name that I will mention of that group, I know Matt Kingsbury is a name that has been working with the 2s at the linebacker position along with Tyler Stolsky. So he could even get into opportunities this upcoming season. I'm not sure if he's going to end up being a starter at any point in the near future because you've got Cody Lindenberg, who has 1, potentially 2 more years he could play here. Maverick Baranowski, who will be around for probably at least 2 more. And then who knows what happens with Devin Williams, Tyler Stolsky, and things like that. So I think he can be a huge rotational piece, but I'm not sure he's a starter. But one name that I did want to close with was Pierce Walsh. I think he could be a starting tight end for the Gophers moving forward, and he's already putting his name into the conversation right now. that's going to do it for us on today's episode of the Locked On Golden Gophers Top 5 Take 5 with the class of 2023. We've got one more class to dive into. If you haven't already listened to the 2022 one, definitely go check that out. Today's 2023, and we have a class of 2024 coming up next. So if you enjoy Gophers daily content, be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Be sure to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the podcast, and tell your fellow Gophers fans about the show so they don't miss out on this daily Gophers content. Moving forward, I will have you covered with more spring practices in this month of April, so be sure to hit subscribe. Row the boat, Sky Go Gophers, as always. And like I said, don't forget to hit subscribe.